Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck,
Spiritual as fuck.
a podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor, with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. It is one thing to go through a spiritual awakening and have spiritual gifts come online while grieving the loss of your mother. It is a whole other level when your young child suddenly starts displaying psychic gifts also. Our guest in this episode, Ellen Edmondson, not only did she experience an abrupt spiritual awakening herself, but at the same time, her toddler son Ethan also started showing psychic abilities. So what do you do in a situation like this? Where do you go for support? This is what drives so much of Ellen's work, as she and her husband John create resources and a support community for parents, family and educators of highly intuitive kids. Not only does Ellen run Highly Intuitive Kids, this former senior government executive is also a medium, intuition coach, spiritual artist, and an author. Her book, A Place of Love and Light, a journey back to compassion, authenticity, and making a positive contribution to the world, is due to be released in August. Before we jump into the episode, Liz and I would like to do a huge shout out to Ethan, who is Ellen and John's son. Thank you for being such a wonderful influence for so many highly intuitive kids and their parents. Keep shining your beautiful light.
So we are here with a beautiful lady that we've been so excited to interview, Ellen Edmondson. Welcome, Ellen.
Hello.
All the way from the US, up early for us and late for you. And I'm interested for you to have you on the show because, number one, we've never had anyone that's going to speak of the things that you will speak of. But secondly, because of some personal experiences that I've had. And, there's probably only a handful of people that have ever really shared whatever I've experienced with my little boy. And growing up between the ages of around about 4 to 6, my son started to share stories of what I eventually worked out to be past lives. And it started as really odd comments. We'd be walking down a street in a suburb and it'd be like, oh, I've been here with my other mummy. And I'd be kind of like, I'd be correcting him and like, oh, you mean that you've been here before with me? And he would kind of just blankly stare off. And then it started as one day actually driving past a church and him saying, oh, mum, what's that? What's that? And I said, a church. And he was like, oh, that's like the place that I married Cesarina. Kind of, and I was like, number one, that's a really strange name to share. But what is he talking about? And and this kind of thing would pop in, and eventually being, I guess, half spiritually minded at that point, I started to wonder if that's what he was experiencing. And as he got towards 6, lots of different stories would come out. And I was really stuck. I'm not going to lie. I had no idea where to turn. Google became my friend, and Google didn't really help me that much at that time. So I'm not going to share too much more than that. And you're going to share a lot of help for parents going through similar things later in this conversation. But what I'd like to start with, Ellen, is I want you to take us back, all the way back to your life before any of this happened to you. What did your life look like?
Wow. Going back, before all of this started for me, before I had my big awakening, I realized now I had this gift before, when I was a child, but I never knew what it was. And I grew up, my mother was a devout Catholic. So we grew up Catholic, and having that strong belief system, you didn't embrace mediumship or intuitiveness or none of that. It wasn't part of our just part of our religious upbringing and just our foundation. Although I will say, I used to watch some talk shows that used to have like Sylvia Brown, the famous psychic on there. I would see John Edwards crossing over. And it just always fascinated me. I didn't know why, even as a young person, I've always thought there might be something there, but never explored anything because I didn't think anything more of it just because of my religious background. But fast forward, so I just kind of suppressed it. I used to know things, I used to hear, like I felt like voices talking to me, sensing things I just could pick up on a lot around me. But I just suppressed it. And so just went about doing what I needed to do with school and everything. But fast forward growing up, I went into business. I actually went into the business world. Went to college, undergrad, and graduate school. Went into work in the federal government, and I worked there for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
And I went into a very left brain logical field because I was good with money, and math. And so I went into finance, but my heart was I was always creative. Ever since I was 8 years old, I loved to draw. If you gave me a pack of crayons and paper, I'd sit and just draw all day long. It just made my heart sing. So, but I always felt more creative, but I knew I was good with math, and I just kind of went into the logical profession. But what happened was when I was doing my career, I went in entry level on a grade scale, 5, one of the lower levels coming out of college. But I quickly worked my way up the ladder from that point to about 16 years. I went from entry level to a senior executive.
Wow.
Which for here, that's pretty amazing because most people don't hit that level hit the senior executive level until they're about in their 50s. But one of the things I had on my side was I just could always make connections. I could pick up things. I could put things together. I just knew things. And I would have people come back to me and say, you called that 2 weeks ago, or you said that 6 months ago. How do you know to make this decision or that decision? And I just always said, I just had strong gut instinct. I just could tell things, figure things out. But I didn't really realize it was just my intuition, an intuitive part of me that was really helping me to make these decisions and do this. And so I knew how to maneuver. People were like, you're very business savvy, but that was it. And looking back on it, I realized now it was really the power of my intuition that was guiding me and driving me through the business world at that point. So that, took me up through that point in my career, but it got to that place where I hit that level and I looked around and I was like, well, there's really nothing else I'm going to do. And things were changing. I had a boss come in, and the federal government changes over, the administration changes, you get different top political people in, and changes the structure of the agencies and the culture. But at that time, I had a boss that we started just really not clicking. The values of what I had, and I always felt like respect and honoring the person as well as the work was important, but the culture changed and it was a little different, and it was more about the business and just the bottom line of figuring out how to make things work. So it was less about the people and the wholeness of people. So I said, well, it's time for me to go. I had gone to a seminar and listened to a lecture by Wayne Dyer. And that night when I had heard that, and I love him, I think anybody who knows Wayne Dyer, he's good information. But he said something that night that really stuck with me. He said, a quote he said was, for anyone, you don't want to die with your music still in you.
Oh,
and that
yes.
Yeah. And I love that quote. And it just resonated so deeply with me on a deeper level that I was like, I'm not happy. This is not feeding my soul anymore. Because I'm always been a person that goes by what makes me feel good and feeds me. And I was like, this isn't feeding me anymore. And I don't want to die with my music still in me. So I went in, wrote up my resignation letters, and went to my boss because yes, that's right. And I was traveling. I had a big position and making really good money and all of this. And I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. It's not feeding me. And I had a mortgage and a car and all this stuff. I was single, not married at the time. And I quit my job. It's like, I just can't do it.
So
but I knew it was brave. And some people have said, it's kind of silly, crazy that you did that. But I was like, I believe in myself, and I believe in, the universe and God, just taking me to wherever I'm supposed to land next. I'm going to make this leap, and I'm just going to pray that the net will appear. And it did, because right before I had left my job, I had actually I met what was then become my husband. And what's funny is I've always been intuitively led. So when at my job, I worked all the time. So I was working 10, sometimes up to 14-hour days, just busy. But I just got what I call that gut instinct. I got a hit to join Match.com. So that online dating.
Yeah.
I never would have done anything like that. But I decided, I was like, well, I'm going to put my profile out there. I'm doing all this work, and I've been working so hard. At that point, I was 36 years old. And I was like, I want to have another side of my life. I want to explore becoming a wife and a mother. So I just put it out there. And within 90 days, I had met my husband.
Free love. It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. That's why I say, because we wouldn't have met each other any other way. And I don't want to go in. I can tell you quick how it was pretty amazing, though, because this is just the power of being guided and letting yourself living from your soul, because I did that. And he reached out to me at one point. And I was kind of talking to somebody else at that time, but he sent me another message, and I responded to that message. So we talked, and like 2 weeks later, we finally got together and went out on our first date. Well, he asked me to go on the date. And I live in Maryland in the United States, and he wanted to take me to see a play on Broadway up in New York, so a few states away.
Yeah.
So as it got closer, I agreed, but I said only if we take public transportation, because we'd never met, and I wanted to make sure I could get around. If he was a weirdo, I wanted to be able to be safe and get home and get away. But as it got closer, the day before, I got nervous, and I was like, I called him up and I said, well, we haven't met. I don't really think I'm not comfortable going out with you, so I'm not going to go on this date. And he's like, well, wait. He's like, let's see what we can figure out. He said, when I ordered the tickets, he kind of ordered them last minute. He said, but when I ordered them, I ordered 2 seats, but the gentleman actually sent me 4 tickets. And he said, when I was ordering them from him, I told him, I was like, you're an angel, because he sent it so late. He placed the order to get the tickets late. He's like, you're an angel. Thank you so much. But when he got the tickets, there were 4 in there. So he told me, I got 2 extra tickets. He's like, I'll tell you what, I really want to go out with you. So I'll let you, if you can bring 2 friends with you. So he took me, it was me, my sister, and a girlfriend. So he took out 2 women he didn't know on our first date.
Blessed art thou amongst women.
That's amazing. And was he scared?
He said I had to be the one concerned that maybe I wouldn't come back.
Yes.
But it was great, and we all laughed about it when we got back. It was thumbs up. That was instant feedback. My girlfriend and my sister were like, "Yeah, he's a nice guy." And then it was 5.5 months after that, we ended up getting engaged, and we got married like a week less than a year of knowing each other.
Oh,
because
wow.
it just clicked. Yeah. But it was all, we just felt guided throughout the whole thing, and that's what brought us together.
Divine timing was involved.
Divine timing. That's what it's like. I was being guided. And then from that point of being married, and then it was 4.5 years, 4 years later when I had my son.
And I guess having that son was probably pretty life-changing. And I'm guessing that you didn't probably expect everything to happen with Ethan like it happened either. Would you like to share?
Not at all. Not at all. Because when we had him, he was our blessing. He was our miracle, because actually we were told we wouldn't be able to have children. And so we did. We ended up, we were told that adoption was going to be our best option, and we went through the whole fertility thing, but we ended up getting pregnant, and we had our beautiful blessing. Yeah. And so we were just overjoyed. But after he was born, it was about 3.5 months after he was born, my mother passed away. And so that was a very earth-shattering kind of a time for me, because my mother and I were extremely close. And we were planning on doing all these things together and spending all this time with Ethan together, but she passed away. But what happened with that was it set the foundation for what led to my spiritual awakening, my big awakening. Because after she passed, I started reading every book I could get by James von Prague, the famous medium, to understand the afterlife. Because I was trying to figure out, it's like, there's got to be more to this. It sent me on this search, the bigger search of meaning of life, and just, how is my mom? Is she going to be okay? I know she was on a different journey. What happens in the afterlife? So I did that. And then just going through my grieving process, trying to manage a little baby. And then when Ethan was around 2 years old, right before I started doing meditations, like Oprah and Deepak Chopra used to have those 21-day challenges. Do you guys remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started doing those because it just gave me a chance to kind of detach from a little 2-year-old and everything I had to do. So, and just kind of go inward. But that meditation time, even after the challenges were over, I continued to do them. But I was laying a foundation, which I didn't realize then, between reading the books by James von Prague, doing the meditation, and I was doing those, and that was around January, 2012. The beginning of 2013, that's when everything happened, and I had my most unusual big awakening that I didn't even realize what was going on. But in January of 2013, one day I had gone to the library and I went to get a book. I was going to check out some books for my son to read to him. But I went past the metaphysical section. And when I went past the metaphysical section, I'm open to always learning anything. I always felt like even books sometimes picked me, or I was guided to things. Yeah. But I went past the metaphysical section, and there was a book called Raymond Buckland's Book of Spirit Communications. Have either of you heard of that book?
No.
No.
Yeah, it's an older book, but it has complete everything about, all different topics in the book about spirit communications. So that one, it just kind of jumped out at me. And I was like, well, I'll get this one. And there were 2 books beside it on automatic writing. And so I didn't know what the topic was, but I just felt like I needed to get those. So I got those, I took them home. And that evening I'd gotten Ethan down to go to sleep. And when I picked up the book and I started flipping through the Raymond Buckland's Book of Spirit Communications, I happened to open automatic writing. And so as I'm reading the description of what automatic writing is, my left hand, I'm left-handed, just started to move on its own. And I'm sitting here like, I'm not doing that. But as I'm reading what it is and my hand is moving, I was like, okay, something is unique here. I need to go get a pen and paper. And so I went and got a pen and paper, and my hand started making scribbles all over the paper and circles. And I just put my hand down. It was just doing its own thing. And I'm sitting here like, wow, what is this? What's going on? So I just let that happen. And so from that point, and that was just going, and a couple days later, I went to check my emails, and see, I'm still wondering what's happening. Ethan's toddling around at that point, but at one point, my hand would start moving. I get paper, and it was just some communication that just started happening. But one time I was in one part of the room doing that because it just kind of kicked out. I needed to do that real quick. Ethan was in another room, but he toddled over to me, and he came and he grabbed my hand, and he said, and his little baby, like, what's wrong with your hand? Your hand broke? Oh. So I said, how did he know that? He was in the other room. So I started seeing little glimpses of things happening with him as things were happening with me, and like his knowing. But I went from automatic writing within 9 days, from automatic writing to automatic typing to speaking in trance. Voice came out of me, and I started speaking in trance. And then started speaking in what people know now as light language. I used to call it just speaking in tongues. So, and I started light language, and I didn't know what all this was, but it happened so fast because I went to check my emails one day, like about 3 days after the automatic writing started, and my hands started flying super speed across the keyboard, just typing all these random letters. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm not doing this. And then after a while, little sentences, after like a day, little sentences started to form, little words. And I was like, okay, this is really strange. So at that point, I said, oh, I need to tell my husband something's going on. It's like, I gotta tell him something.
Tell us what he said.
Well, I was like, I need to tell you something's happening, unusual is happening. And I started explaining about the automatic writing and the automatic typing. And he saw me one time. It's like, it was almost like I had a code, like my hand would move back and forth when it was writing and my fingers would move when it was typing. That's what I needed to do. So he saw that and he's like, okay. And he still didn't think too much of it. I mean, he just was like, okay. But one time when I went to type and he went out to walk the dog and I was sitting there, but I felt stuck. I was like, all of a sudden I was frozen and I could feel my voice box, my throat, vocal cords started shifting and I couldn't speak. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. This is kind of weird, really weird. And my husband came back in with the dog. And when he came in with the dog and put the dog away, he came looking for me. And it was in that moment, this voice just came out of me and started speaking to him and saying it was like a group of angels or just being, these angelic beings that were communicating with him through me. And when that happens, it's like I'm in like, I don't remember everything that is said, but he was floored and I was amazed. I'm there, but not there. And we were just like, what do you do with this? Wow, what's going on? So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. We started making some recordings and things that we've never even shared or really even talked about, but we started making these recordings and of what was coming through, and that happened for a while. And I had to go on a process of trying to understand all of this. So I wasn't comfortable because I was like, ooh, I don't know what's happening here. So I don't want to, let me figure this out. So after that happened, my husband's like, let's do some research on this and let's figure out what it is. So he ended up researching and finding an intuitive development class for us. And we ended up going to the intuitive development class. But even before that, in some of my writings, one of the things that came through was that spirit that told me I was going to start also like in 6 months doing drawings. And that in 6 months later, that's what happened. I started doing drawings for spirit. But I went to this intuitive development class, my husband and I, and we sat down and we talked to the Reverend. And she was a beautiful woman and started explaining to her what was going on. Because I kept saying, I would tell my husband, am I going cuckoo berries? What's going on? I don't know, not sure.
We've been there.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is. I was like, but I'll just keep doing it. I don't know what's going on. So when we went and we talked to the Reverend, beautiful woman, and she said, and I explained to her, we talked to her about everything that was happening. And she said, oh, sweetie, she goes, you're not going cuckoo berries. She's like, there's nothing wrong. She's like, you're gifted. You have a gift that's meant to be shared with the world.
Wow.
And she said, so you need to set up a website or Facebook or YouTube. She's like, any messages you're getting, you need to put them out for the world to have, because they're not meant to stay with you.
How beautiful is that, to have that as such a positive experience? Because for many people, when they have that experience, it's not necessarily as well received, and that may shut us down for a while. So the fact that you had someone so beautiful, so encouraging, to be supported by your husband in that, doing this class together, I just think that is such a beautiful foundation for being able to share your gift.
Absolutely. And I'm so appreciative to him, because he's been supportive throughout this whole thing. It's just like he was saying there's something more here. And I knew there was something more. But it was just so strange. We didn't know where to go with it. So, after that class, then it was just a matter of me we're like, okay, now still, what do we do with this? How do we work with this? So that was a 6-week class of what she did. And she was telling us more, and we met some people, and it was like, okay. But for me, the biggest part was trying to reconcile my belief system and growing up Catholic with doing this work. And was it right? How did it fit in? What do I do? So I had to work through that on a personal level. It's just like, how does this fit into everything? And should I be doing this? And how does this work? And so it just sent me on a big journey, and taking more classes, and I met more mentors and teachers that I had, but I had to get comfortable with it. So as I'm going through that, when Ethan's 2 years old, that's when, like what you said, Liz, about yourself, that's when it kicked in that Ethan started talking about past life instances for him. But we started noticing things like, when we would take him out places, he would scream and cry because being around a lot of people or being in certain places, it bothered him. But we weren't totally understanding what was happening, because as I was going through this as an adult, we'd never seen what it looked like in a child.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had to figure out. So we're going through things at the same time and trying to figure all of this out. But I started noticing like how he might go to some people or be in some situations he'd cry and some he wouldn't. How, just he was sensing. I was starting to pick up like he's sensing energy, and he was sensitive to certain like noises and things around him. But so when he was around 2 years old, one night there was 2 incidents and they happened not that far apart. One night we were going to put him to bed, and he started racing upstairs to go to bed, which he normally didn't do. And so we asked him, why are you racing to go to bed? And he looked at me, he's like, Mom, he's like, because Grandma comes to play ball with me.
Oh, wow.
And this is your mom.
And that was my mom.
Oh.
And so that really warmed my heart. I was like, oh my goodness, I was just like, wow. And see, I will back up a little bit just so you'll know this part too. After she passed away, we had a lot of Ethan's toys, his baby toys would go off around the house. The lights would flicker. His toys would make noises. The music, the radio would turn on and off. It never scared me because I knew I was like, that had to have been her. And and at this time, I still didn't know the gifts that I had, the talents of being a medium. And I would go to sleep at night and I would see her just standing like she was right in front of me. And that happened for like about 8 months with all these just activities. One day, my husband and I were talking about whether we should go forward with this event that we were planning before she passed. And as we were standing by the mantle, a picture that was on the mantle it didn't just drop, it kind of flew off the mantle, like between where we were standing in the living room. And in that moment, we were like, I guess Mom wants us to go ahead.
That's a yes.
And that's a whole other level of energetics. It's like, it's one thing sensing and feeling, but to actually have the physical movement of a 3D object is, there's no denying that. You can't ignore those signs.
But we didn't talk to anybody about this. It was like all that had happened. But after like about 8 months, I finally, because I couldn't sleep, I could see her clearly every night. And it was just like, wow. And I was like, okay. So one night when I did finally try to go to sleep, she came to me in my dream and she said, Ellen, I realize I'm scaring you. And that's not what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to leave and you'll be okay.
Oh, wow.
And after that night, everything around the house stopped and she left.
Oh.
And I was just like, wow, and so and then that's when all these other things, like with Ethan, but I always knew she was around. And so that was just like her powerful sign to let me know. And I was like, okay. But so when he said he was going to play ball with her, that was such a beautiful confirmation again that she was around. And so that happened. And then it was a little while later when he would hear emergency vehicles like fire trucks or ambulances or police cars. And he would just get so kind of nervous. It would scare him. And one night we were trying to put him to sleep and a fire truck went by and he got panicked. But after he calmed down, he finally started talking and he started telling his dad and I about how he's like, these bad men were chasing him. And he said, but they chased him into this building that was on fire. And he said, but Mom and Dad, my body died, but I didn't. He said, and you and Dad were there and you were sad, but you weren't you and Dad. We were other people. And he said, but I went to the nowhere place. And he said, I waited in the nowhere place. And he said, and I was waiting for you two to come back together. And he was talking about like now, because he's like, you two took a long time to get together. He's like, I was waiting and waiting for you. And my husband and I did get married older. And he said, because I was waiting because I was coming back to be your son.
Oh, wow.
Oh gosh. Now you speak about this so matter-of-factly at the moment because there's distance, Ethan is quite famous and you've had to do, you've gotten used to doing podcasts and interviews. But in that moment, what did it feel like? Just share what it felt like in the moment, hearing that story from him.
In that moment when he said that, my husband and I we just looked at each other like, wow. What do you, our thoughts was like, what do you do with this? It's just like, we didn't say anything to him. We're just like, oh, okay. And we didn't want to press him like with a whole bunch of questions, but, we asked a couple, but he was tired and he wanted to go to sleep. But we're sitting there, we looked at each other like, wow, this is amazing. What do we do? So we just kept listening. Anything he would say, we would listen. And sometimes we might go back and try and ask him a little question here, there, but he was like little kids, when they're done with something, they're just done like, oh, I'm going to go play, or I'm going to do. So we didn't press him on it. We would just listen whenever he would talk, but we were just like, wow, what do you do? And who do you share? We don't share with anybody. It's just like, okay.
I just wish every child, whether they have intuitive or psychic abilities, were born into a family like that. Like for so many of us, we're just conditioned to brush things under the carpet or to dismiss it. Or if you've got a religious upbringing, because I'm also Catholic, it's like, oh no, we can't be talking about things like that. It's like, or don't tell the neighbors, or, don't mention that at school. So to be, for Ethan to have been born into a family that had the presence of mind, okay, let's not drill you with questions. Let's not push this under the carpet. Let's just allow it. And then, no doubt there was a regroup session in the background saying, what's going on? But it's such a gift. And for anyone who's listening to this, whose child, whether you know at this moment in time that your child is going through it, or maybe this podcast interview is making you think about, that time when little Billy said whatever, that could have been. So hopefully people now listening are starting to think about allowing that space, allowing the child to just have the experience that they're having and to get curious about it.
That's absolutely, absolutely true. Because after, and the thing that helped was because I was also going through this, we were going through it at the same time. So that's what also made us more open to it, because we were starting to research and starting to try and read and starting to understand this. And one of the things we came across was Many Lives by Many Masters, Brian Weiss's book, which is a great book that I think everyone should read, because that helps to give some perspective to all this. And then also another one, there's a Memories from Heaven by Wayne Dyer and I forgot the woman's name, but that's one about stories that they've collected about children that regularly have these past life memories. And when kids are small, between the ages of 0 to 7, 0 to 8, they're naturally still so connected to, where they just came from that source, from the energy of being, on the other side. And so when you're hearing your child talk about these things, it's just natural. Some kids grow out of it, and some kids will still hold on to it, like Ethan held on to it for quite a while. And so just listening is one of the best things you can do, and hold that space for them. Yeah.
So from that moment of Ethan sharing those past life memories, how did his abilities start to develop?
Well, and that's the thing. His abilities they did start to develop. He would start talking about different things with me that, like I said, I just started listening and trying to see where to go. Because for quite a while, he used to tell me, he would say, Mom, I'm older than you. And sometimes he would tell me that quite. He's like, I'm older than you, Mom. I'm older than you. And in the beginning, I was like, what? And then I started thinking about it, because he's having past life memories. I was like, oh, he's still. So I was like, okay. And he would sometimes not want to do what I told him to do or asked him to do, because he's like, well, I'm older than you. And it finally clicked to me. And I was like, well, you know what, Ethan? I said, your soul may be older than mine. I was like, but in this lifetime, I'm your mother. And we have to work in a partnership. So we need to work together. Okay. And then I started calling him young Jedi. I was like, okay, young Jedi, young master, we have to work together.
Good work, Mom. Good work.
but it started bringing him to, start understanding. It's like, okay, it's like, this is a partnership. We're working together. But after a while, he grew out of that, because I was like, okay, you are older than me. I'll give you that. Your soul is older than mine, but it's okay. So then I think he got the recognition that he needed and that understanding, so he could start letting that part go. But we noticed like he couldn't sleep at night a lot of times, and he would, and a lot of children experience that. But one of the things that Ethan, we found out when we really started to understand what Ethan's abilities were after we did the Psychic Kids show, when we got on that.
Tell us about
that. See, when he was going to school, and he would be talking about things. And one time he came home from school and he was upset, and he was about 8 at that time. He said, "Mom, I was trying to tell the kids at school that we're multidimensional beings, but nobody would listen to me." And so, and I was like, "Sweetie, you can't go to school telling the kids you're multidimensional beings." I was like, they don't understand what that is. I was like, there's adults that don't understand that. And it's like, they're just going to say you're weird. Don't talk about that. And he was like, "But that's what we are. And our first communications was just with our mind. We didn't talk with words." And he started saying these things, but he was going to school making reference to this. And so then the kids started bullying him because they were thinking he was weird. And I kept telling him, it's like, "No, you don't talk about it at school. You have Dad and I to talk about it." And I was like, but he thought, and I wasn't fully opening up about my abilities with him because I thought he was too young and I was still trying to figure it out. But he was taking what we were telling him. He started internalizing like something was wrong with him. And that was never our intention, because we just know that people outside he could come home and talk about it, but people outside couldn't understand it. So as he was getting bullied at school, and it was just trying to figure out how to help him and to manage this, because he'd come home and say, "Why can't I talk? This is what's important to me. Why can't I talk about it?" It's like, because people don't understand. Kids and people don't understand this. So I was just praying for an answer, because he was just starting to shut down so much because of what was happening. He was kind of closing off and becoming withdrawn. So I was like, please, universe, God, please send me an answer. And I happened to be checking my email, and I saw, and it just came like that week. I was just really praying on this and asking for an answer. Casting call for Psychic Kids show, and it was just out of nowhere. And we knew there was nothing wrong. It's like, we couldn't go to a doctor. We couldn't talk to the teachers at school. Even our family, Catholic, not everybody was, we didn't talk to them about this because we knew the understanding wasn't fully there for that, because it was different than our belief system. So it appeared in my inbox, and I just felt, let me just apply. I mean, I'm looking for an answer. I was praying for something. This just popped up. Let me apply, because I know he's got abilities. I sent in a reply for that, and like 2 hours later, somebody had pinged me back and said, "Hey, we saw what you wrote. We'd be interested in talking with you." We went back and forth, did interview with me, with Ethan. They have a whole process. 2 weeks later, they were like, gave us an acceptance to be on the show.
Wow.
And they were like, "Yeah, we would love to have you on the show." And then it was about 2 months after that, they came out and did the filming for it. But I felt like that was all divinely guided, because everything just happened so quick, and that message just happened to appear in my inbox. And so then we did that. And through that, with having the cast and his mentor come out and work with us, we found out that Ethan had a lot more abilities than we knew about. And we knew he was really sensitive with everything. But it gave us, what happened was it gave us a better understanding and some words and context to put around it. And for him, so instead of feeling like he was so different, he now knew, because on the show, there were 15 other kids across the country that they highlighted, that there were other kids like him. And we watched the episodes together, and he saw that. And he knew, then he started knowing the word empath and mediumship and intuitive, he started getting, so he knew it wasn't anything wrong, but that he actually had this different ability. And so that really helped a lot in helping him to open back up more from him being shut down. But it was a process.
Can I ask, Ellen, the gifts that were kind of labeled, or the gift of language, I guess, first of all, and vocabulary, because any of us going through, even as an adult, never mind for a child, we're Googling terms, we're trying to figure out what this is. I know even for me, I'm still trying to figure out what are these things, these, senses and gifts that I have. But what was it through that show, or whether it was the language or the labeling of the gifts that Ethan had? Is there a list of gifts that he has that he's suddenly now aware of, that you've got terms and terminology for?
Oh, yeah, yes. And we were able to, through what they gave us on the show and then more research afterward, it helped him to understand like that he's an empath, and that how he can deeply feel other people's emotions, and he takes it like they're his own, so he can feel it and register it in his own body. And that's why, like, when he was getting bullied at school, it was so hard for him, because he was taking all that in so deeply and feeling, just the negative nature of all that on a different level than what some other children who weren't as sensitive, how they might feel it. But mediumship, he now understood that when he was seeing spirits around, that's what the word for that. Ethan actually astral travels. He'll do at night, he leaves his body, and children can do that. And I realize now, I used to do that as a child, but I didn't know that's what it was. But he astral travels, and he used to tell us, we would watch TV or something. He's like, Mom, I've been there. Mom, Dad, I've seen this place, or I've been here. And we're like, we've never been there before. And he's like, no, I've been there. I traveled there. And he would tell us places that he's gone.
Wow.
I'm thinking of parents who are worried about their child going down the street to the local park, and you have to worry about your child going on astral travel. It's like, how do you protect that? How do you, there's a whole other level of just surrender to our kids that you need to go through to be able to parent in that way. I would love to know, because this is such a driving force behind the work that you do now. Like, obviously, you and Ethan, your spiritual journeys are so tightly woven, and your husband as well. So collectively as a family. And, I'd love for you to share with us and with our listeners about, the work you do with Intuitive Kids and the community that you have created, because you now provide so many of those resources that parents like Liz and I, that like you went through yourself, that need. And, I've been through your website, I've been through so many of your resources, and it is not just for parents of intuitive kids, not just for educators of intuitive kids, but for adults going through a spiritual awakening. There were terms on there that I thought, oh my gosh, this is a gold mine of information. So can you share a little bit around, I guess, the essence of the work that you do now today to support intuitive kids?
Sure, because I'm going to just give a little, because I love telling this story, and I just want to give a little backstory, because talking about Ethan and what really kind of pushed us into that was one day when he did come home, and it was after the show, and he was still talking about kids, his abilities, and I was talking to him about and he was a little down about how you need to accept himself and his abilities, and all of this. And he looked at me, because I was doing readings and started working with this with people, but I was on the quiet and doing it behind the scenes. But he looked at me and he said, Mom, I can't be me until you be you. Stop hiding.
Wow.
And that was such a powerful moment, because it made me stop right in my tracks. I was like, whoa, okay. And I felt that on a deep resonance within me, because I was like, that was just like the universe. That was God just saying, wake up, because you need to model. And that's, if you want to parent your child in the best way, and Ethan needs a good, strong, you have to model for him what it is to love and accept himself and his abilities, and be able to grow up to, do what you're telling him to do, to love himself and embrace it. I have to show him that. And I realized in that moment, I was like, I'm not doing that. And so I had to step, and that changed things for me, that conversation. So all of that led to these resources and everything that we produced, because everything that we went through, and after seeing that there were the families across the country, and all of this drove me into a lot of research. And I was like, we need to help other people, because there are more. In my research, I found that there was 10 to 15% of the population have this heightened sense of intuition, these abilities. So it's more out there than what people think. And I know TV and all, they will portray it a certain way, and sometimes they portray it as scary or in a negative light, when this is really, it's a beautiful gift that people have. And so we wanted to put out information that would help to educate parents, and not just parents, it was parents, educators, other health, other professionals, whether mental health professionals or family advocates, just to put out enough information to open conversations, open dialogues, get people to start opening their mind to this, that we're all intuitive. Everybody has intuition, just some people have it to a heightened degree. And that's what we wanted to get people to start having conversations and normalizing, because when we're seeing our child being bullied, and we know there's other kids out there who are sensitive and experiencing and being misunderstood. And then as adults who shut down, we know what we went through being misunderstood. And so we wanted to put that information out there. So we started a website with all these resources for all those different categories: parents, educators, mental health, other and other family advocates, and then started Facebook groups, because we knew that the three main things we needed and that we wish we had and we wanted to provide to others was support, resources, and a community. And so that's what we did with getting the website up and available to everyone, and then this Facebook community that people could join and talk. We have meetups for parents, for kids, Q&A sessions. We've had the support of different experts coming in, authors, talking to the community and sharing information to help others.
Wow. And we will obviously post the link to Highly Intuitive Kids in the show notes. One question I'm really interested in, as you have now met other parents, had the opportunity to hear stories from other children, is whether you feel there is a link between children that go through school and are diagnosed with things such as ADHD, autism, or ASD, whether this is a link to spirituality and children going through a spiritual journey. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually I do. There's two categories with that. There are children who are, that can, high intuition, this gift of high intuition can get, it mimics other diagnoses. So sometimes these children can be diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, some with dyslexia, different things. So that's one of the things on our website. We have a section. I think anyone who goes out there, if you're a parent, read the educator section, read the other professional section, because we do have links to those, like being misdiagnosed, and there's links to actual studies and to PhD reports and things that you want to familiarize yourself with, because parents really need to educate yourself to actually know what's an actual brainstem issue, which is a diagnosis, and what is a learning style difference. Because what happens with schools, for some of the children with this trait, they're intuitive learners. And intuitive learners, our school systems are not really set up for that learning style, because they can make bigger leaps in thinking and connections than what children who don't have this trait. Because I always say the school system is set up for like linear thinking, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. But children with the gift of high intuition, like my son, even, and myself, and anyone, you can make those leaps. You go A, B, C, X, Y, Z, because you can get to the big picture, make those connections like I was doing back even when I was in business. But what happens is when that happens for these children, they will start going off daydreaming and doing other things, because they've already figured out the conclusion. And they're not so concerned with the details in the middle.
Yes. And none of that show your work that you're asked to do. It's like, no, but I've got the answer. I already know. I've moved on.
That's exactly it. And that's what happens with these kids. But then they can get, parents can get, they're not paying attention in class. They're not this, that, but it's maybe the learning style and how the environment. And so one of the things on our website, we do have a link to a Myers-Briggs. And that's one of the ways that parents can, the Myers-Briggs personality test, and it will help to determine if you're intuitive or if you're more of a linear sensate learner, and just your personality style. I always say, I advocate that. I think for your tweens and teens, whether they do it at school or parents, find out your child's learning style and just their traits. And if they come up intuitive, we did that with Ethan, which we knew he would be intuitive, but it also came up that he was very empathic as well. But when you have that, and you can talk to your schools, you can talk to your teachers and have that information, it helps to inform, what kind of environment they need to be in. I think even for teachers to know the student's style is helpful, because if you know that you have more children who rank intuitive than like sensate logical, you can gear your curriculums a little different to set up the
Absolutely.
environments to help
I
learn.
love that.
I think that's huge, because Myers-Briggs, particularly like my corporate background, like that's huge for profiling in corporate organizations. So many corporate learning and development, hinges on Myers-Briggs as well. So it's not something that's just tied to being intuitive, or for people who think that's a little bit of woo-woo. There's a lot of science and research and established work in this. And I love that it's now being brought to kids, because yes, my Myers-Briggs is ENFJ. So I have intuitive in there as well. Did I know that back at the time when I did it in corporate land? No, but I love that it's now being adapted and applied to children as well, because if there are any parents who are listening who happen to have done a Myers-Briggs in their corporate training or have come across it in any ways, instantly that removes a barrier for them. It's like, oh, that's something I know, that's something I'm familiar with. It's something that's established. I can now link to that. So I just love that you're using such practical tools, that you're using things that are already there and out and established, but also bringing a lot of resources together on your website, because it is it's absolute a gold mine of information that is there, and it is a bit of a rabbit hole for any of us who are interested in it. It's like it brings you so many places. We do know, so Liz and I know that you're also working on a book, so not just the website and the Facebook community, but you're also working on a book. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. And that book has been a 10-year project for me, because back when my abilities first opened up, and I was spending time writing. I just received these beautiful inspired messages that I would hear, because I'm very clear audience. I have the hearing and sensing and knowing and feeling. And I would just have these messages coming to me that it was just like taking dictation. I would just write down what I was hearing. And part of when that reverend that I talked about said, messages to share with the world, I had set up after my awakening, like in October, my husband was like, put up a website. So I put up a website and just started posting on the blog, and is my own do-it-yourself kind of website, and just put these things out there. And since the website was up to now, I was amazed, because I had no services, but just those that I'm sharing those messages. I mean, even as of today, there's been over like 500,000 visits to the site to look at the inspirational information and the messages that are out there. But what I did was I took that and plenty more. I've got notebooks, stacks of notebooks with it, and I compiled a book of my inspired channeled writings and put it all together in a collection that will be coming out in the summer. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, and because it's been on the website, but I have been feeling guided that it needs to be shared with a bigger audience. So to put it in print and have it as an actual book.
Beautiful. And to have it, that collection, that, even the physicality of having the book is such a wonderful achievement, because some of us don't like to do the reading online. We like to, have something that we can highlight and put our little cliff notes in as well. So fantastic. Yeah. You'll have to keep us posted on that.
Yes, we can't wait. Oh, thank you so much, Ellen. This has been such an interesting conversation. I feel like I have so many more questions to ask, but I'll definitely be diving into that website and probably get lots of my answers there. Now, I have one very final question to ask to wrap up this hour. If you have any advice for a parent that has a child that is experiencing anything spiritual at the moment, what should they say, or what should they do?
That's a great question. And the things that I say for parents is just to hold that space, just to listen to them, because younger kids are naturally connected, and they're going to have those, be talking about things. They may have imaginary friends. They may start talking past lives. They may just hold that space, and don't push them on it. Just normalize it. Like, oh, really? Tell me more. Oh, that's so great. And you got a visit from, you saw somebody, your grandpa or grandma. That's wonderful. Don't make it like it's Don't dismiss it. Don't make them feel like it's weird or anything is wrong, because they'll shut down. Once they shut down and you start shutting off those abilities, then that's how you have a lot of adults that have been shut down younger. And then you've got to come back to your wholeness, because you've got to find a way. It's a part of who you are, and you've got to reclaim that at some point. And so just give them positive feedback, support them on that. Don't dismiss it. And then just help them with educating yourself. That's the number one. Educate them, go through the website, get with other, intuitives in the area, professional to link up with somebody for your family, educate yourself as much as possible, and then help your child. The more tools you put in your parenting toolkit and the more techniques you learn, get into communities like our Facebook community, our parent community. If you have anything local, do that. Get your child around other children who are like them, or in situations where they can talk and feel comfortable with their abilities, and then just start teaching them, because they naturally are more sensitive. They're going to have different stressors than what other kids would have, and being able to help work them through that, with helping them be able to sleep through the night, with helping to, process their intuitive overload. So I say the biggest thing is just give them positive feedback, educate yourself as much as possible, get them around other children or environments where they can have support and know that they're not alone. Those three things, and let them help them to process their intuitive energy. And those are things like physical activity, meditation, yoga, tapping, things that will help them to burn that up, playing outside in nature. Those are just like a couple key things. But if you can do that with them, that will be a big, big help. And don't be alarmed. It's part of who we are. It's part of who we are. And even adults have intuitive experiences that a lot of times they don't talk about. So it's understandable. Our children will have them too.
Oh, absolute, the best, the best advice. Thank you so much, Ellen. I'm sure all of our listeners are going to be rushing out now and joining the Facebook page and jumping on the website. And we will definitely be waiting for the book to be released as well. So thank you so much for being with us again. And we can't wait to hopefully speak to you again in the future.
Oh, I'd love to come back. And there's always so much more to talk about and share. So thank you for having me.
That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time. This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.